how family is so important. Family and the community in which your family is brought up in. So that village. Politics, when you get into politics, you really have to understand who you are, why you're there, and actually make sure you shake down your cupboard so there's no skeletons in it. If you're genuinely, like, again, myself, I was brought up in a culture where you do respect people, you can have that debate without it getting personal.
Hello everyone and welcome to voiceofaroha Wellness Next to Radio 106.1 FM. My name is Ati and I'm here with my co-host Meg. How are you today, Meg?
I'm very good. And we're here with our lovely guest, Barbara Edmonds. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, Talaflava, I'm Barbara Edmonds. I am the Labour Party Finance and Economy, Savings and Investment spokesperson.
Kia ora. Welcome to the studio today, Barbara. We're super excited to have you here today. We want to hear all about your journey starting into politics. So would you tell us a little bit about how you got into this position that you're in right now?
So I'm also the Member of Parliament for Mana.
Yeah.
So sorry about that one, Mana, because I do have other portfolios.
Yeah.
But ultimately I got into governance, not just politics, because I realised in the community where I live in Porirua, there are a lot of children who don't have the same opportunities my children have.
Yeah.
So it happened to be I was driving along our main road, it was raining, it was wet, and I saw a local kid from our intermediate who had no jumper and was in jandals and was walking home in the rain.
That's awful.
Yeah. And so I'm a mother of 8 children. I have 6 girls, 2 boys, between the ages of 12 and 21.
Yeah.
If you do the maths, there's no twins though. And so ultimately I realised my upbringing, I was brought up by 2 loving parents.
Yeah.
My mum, though, died when I was 4, and my father raised us up on a benefit, got a really good education, became a tax lawyer eventually.
Yeah.
So for me, I realised that there's a lot of kids in our society that don't have the opportunities my children have.
Right.
So that's how I got into governance.
Yeah.
And I just happened to work as a tax lawyer, got asked to move to the Beehive to look after National Party ministers and then Labour government ministers.
Yeah.
And then I got cornered by a couple of MPs saying, you should run for Parliament for us in Mana. And then the rest is kind of history.
Obviously, through a lot of that, you have a lot of different influences. What do you think were the key things throughout maybe your childhood as you were heading into these bigger roles that turned you into the leader you are today?
So politics, when you get into politics, you really have to understand who you are, why you're there, and actually make sure you shake down your cupboard so there's no skeletons in it. And so it's quite a period of self-reflection. So for me, I was quite clear what my purpose was, and it was to go there to be a voice for my community where I live, but also going back to when you lose your mother when you're quite young. So I was 4 when Mum passed away from cancer, and we buried her on my 5th birthday. I think about that, how life could be really different, but for that, what had happened there.
Definitely.
And so for me, my father, who was a widower at the age of 40, with 4 children under the ages of 11, and Mum died when she was 35. That's really, really young.
So young,
And you don't realise it at the time. But when I got into politics, I realised, well, why am I here? What's my purpose for being here? And what are the lessons that I've learnt and that I want to be able to achieve, and use those lessons to achieve things in Parliament. So
That's amazing. So would you say your dad has been a very influential role model in your life growing up?
Oh, absolutely, hugely. He was a very strict Samoan Catholic father. You can't have a boyfriend until you finish school, and you finish school and it's like you can't have a boyfriend until you finish university. Lots of our ethnic minority families will know what that's like. But ultimately my dad, we were brought up quite poor, but there was a couple of really key things why I am a Labour Party person and a member and a supporter. When my parents came from Samoa in 76, they were able to buy their first home because of a Labour Party policy from Walter Nash, who was one of our Labour Party Prime Ministers. He put a scheme together where you can capitalise. People used to get family benefits, so you can lump the family benefits together, the amount that you would have got over the year, and you can use it to buy your first home. So that was a scheme that helped my parents into their first home. When mum died and dad decided to spend some time off to basically look after us kids to get into a new routine, he was able to go on the unemployment benefit. The welfare system in New Zealand was established by Sir Michael Joseph Savage, again, a Labour Party politician and policy. And then my dad went back to, after 8 years, I got to go to college. My dad went back to school and retrained to become a social worker. So one of the key things that helped him become a social worker was the training incentive allowance. It means he could pay for his transport costs. You know, that was a really proud moment for me in my first term as a Labour MP in 2020 when we brought back the training incentive allowance.
Of course,
And then when my husband and I had our first couple of children, we were really poor because I was still studying my law and arts degrees and my husband was working in a lower paid job as an apprentice. It was a boost through working for families, which meant our family went from having $8 in the hand to just over $100. That was a Helen Clark, Sir Michael Cullen. So these really key progressive policies that Labour brought through were a reason why myself as a child who was brought up in poverty never fell through the cracks.
Right.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people will be able to agree with that it's that you can see all the influences through our past generations as how certain policies have helped us out. Like I remember my parents and talking about how our grandparents might have used state housing, again, Michael Joseph Savage, all of these cool policies that have been brought through. Was there ever any other draw to any other party or policy through, or has it always been Labour?
It's always been Labour.
Always been Labour,
I did work for National Party ministers as a public servant, so I was the revenue advisor for Michael Woodhouse and for Judith Collins. And so I worked for under John Key and then Bill English national government for 18 months before the 2017 election. And then when Jacinda came through, it was like, she's the kind of leader that I can totally relate to. So I switched to a political role and started working for Labour in a political means and started looking after Stuart Nash, who was a minister under Jacinda Ardern. And then 2020 rolled around and I stood to become an MP.
That's really cool. So how has your, I guess, upbringing in like a Pacific community, how has that shaped the work that you want to do or the impact that you want to create as an MP in your current role?
I think the beautiful thing around Pacific communities, I see it a lot in Māori communities, I see it in Asian communities and ethnic communities, is how family is so important.
Definitely.
Family and the community in which your family is brought up in, so that village. So for me, it was so important to make sure that when I decided to run for politics, that those values that I hold very dearly to myself were reflected in the party that I stood for.
Yeah, definitely. I really like the theme of Samoan language this week, which was a well-grounded self is a successful self. I think that's really beautiful. Has that had much of an impact on you personally? Like, politics is a really big, I guess, role to be in. So how do you stay grounded throughout all of that?
Yeah, and it comes back down to your roots and remembering why you're there and how you got there and remembering the importance of bringing others with you.
On the journey.
For me, the journey of being, my first language is Nganana Samoa, but then, funny sort of story is my cousins, our family home where we used to be like a transit house, so families would move over from Samoa. You'd have a family per room. My dad said the most we had in our house is 23 people.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but that kind of happens.
Wow.
So my cousins came over from Samoa. They were sort of a little bit older than me. And my dad said to me and my brother, who were kind of around their age group, that we were to stop speaking Samoan and just speak English to help my cousins learn.
Right.
Because my cousins were really frustrated being Samoan was their first language, English was their second. They'd go to school, other kids would mock them for not having good English skills, and so they'd beat them up.
Wow.
So this is back in the 80s, so it's a very different time.
Right.
Very different time. But so my father said to help them learn, we were to speak English only. So over time, I lost the ability for me to speak Nganana Samoa fluently. Can totally understand it.
Wow.
So those synapses that happen when you're 2 and that's
Muscle
your first
memory.
language. All of that, still remember that.
Cool.
But can't speak it confidently when I'm in a situation where I have to,
Yeah.
I will absolutely do it.
Beautiful.
But it's quite an important piece for me being a Samoan woman. When I was elected in 2020, straight away there's a responsibility from your Samoan and Pacific community, because they're like, you're Samoan first before you're a member of parliament.
Absolutely.
So it's been a journey to reclaim my language, but it's a journey that I have really valued, because again, for me, it's where my roots are.
Totally.
Obviously, you've kind of showed how you're so connected to that, like turanga waiwai, right? Connected to your roots, and that's enabled you to become an amazing leader. What does that kind of leadership mean to you, not just in Parliament, but in your everyday life? Like, how do you think you show it and see it through what you do?
I think through respect and understanding that not everybody thinks the same way as you. Understanding diversity and the diversity of views is really important as a member of parliament. The other really important thing is that it's really hard to wear a mask when you're in politics, because the mask will slip off.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to be your genuine self
Authentic
as a
self.
member of parliament. And for me, it's really important that what I say publicly, those are the words that I will be held to account to when I get to a position where, if I'm a future Minister of Finance and I make decisions, it's really important for me to remember, again, why am I here? What was my purpose? Got to remember that every day. And so it's a really important element that staying grounded and rooted in the communities in which you live. And for me in Porirua here in Wellington, it's got some of the most beautiful scenery. It's 5 minutes from anywhere in Porirua to a beach, but it also has real high incomes. It's the third highest medium income in the country. Wow. People don't realise that.
Cool.
But then it also has a pocket of deprivation and where it's tough for some people. So it's a balance in that, and the only way you can balance it is by staying connected to the community you represent.
Definitely. And as a politician, you obviously have to engage in a lot of debate with a lot of people who may not necessarily hold the same views as you. And how do you go about being respectful and also mindful of respecting everyone's opinions?
So my opposition is the Minister of Finance, Nicola Willis. She has a particular way in which she answers questions in the House, and in a particular way. She's very articulate in her conveyance of messaging. My main thing is just to stay calm and realise that you can question the policy decisions, but it doesn't mean that you basically attack the person.
Right.
So it is a real balance in the way that you work through it. But again, if you're genuinely, like, again, myself, I was brought up in a culture where you do respect people. You can have that debate without it getting personal.
Would you say that in Parliament there's a lot of like unseriousness and like silliness, I guess, between different MPs that may not take things as seriously? Like, a lot of people have said that NZ Parliament is kind of a joke because people just don't take anything seriously. People are always making jokes. People are, what are your
I can
thoughts on
understand how people get to that perspective, particularly if you watch Question Time or if you watch as legislation goes through the House. But we do have a really important role, and for me, I do take that quite seriously. If other members of Parliament don't, well, then that's on them. And karma does eventually come round. That's what I believe in.
Yes.
But ultimately, for me, again, it's the mask. People's masks slip. So it's the easiest thing to do is just be your genuine self.
I mean, it's that classic thing. People absolutely forget that MPs are human, and that comedy and that jovialness is all part of being human. We were talking about kind of being true to yourself in Parliament, but obviously there is a party line out there that you are sort of expected to follow. How do you kind of fight that battle between being authentic while making sure you're sticking to the line?
It's easy to follow the party line when it reflects your values. That's ultimately what it comes down to. And if it gets to the point, which I don't think it would with Labour, where it ever removes from the values that I believe in, given what the Labour Party, who we stand for, then it's quite clear it's time to leave, But ultimately, the Labour values are the same values that I share.
Would you say that being a good person has the same characteristics as someone that's a good leader? Do you think those two things go hand in hand?
Ultimately, you'd hope so. Ultimately, when you become a leader in any forum, you have to be able to, one, connect with other people, two, be able to back your decisions. That's actually can be really hard. And the way you back your decisions is because you know that the decision you've made is with the best and good intentions. Sometimes and I'm going to be political here.
Yeah.
You know, I look across the House and I look at the way the government are making decisions at the moment and some of the decisions they have made.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, who are you working for?
Right.
Who are these decisions for? So, for example, the Treaty Principles Bill, the Regulatory Standards Bill, you know, some of the tax cuts that were given to particular companies.
Yeah.
That does not sit well with me,
Right.
and they might think they're making a good decision, but ultimately then it just makes my job even more important to be able to, one, hold them to account, and then two, win the next election.
Yeah, definitely. And as a Pacific wahine who is in Parliament, as a politician, do you always feel like your voice is properly heard? Do you always feel like you're able to get your point across? Do you feel like it's a culturally sensitive and culturally safe space for you to be in?
I think because our Labour Party caucus is diverse, and we do have there are no Pacific people on the government side. We have 5 Pacific MPs. We have Tiana Tuiono, who is the MP, list MP based in Palmerston North for the Greens. I feel safe because I have people who have got my back. Also, I feel safe because I know what I'm talking about.
Definitely,
You know, I've been a tax lawyer for over a decade and I'm working in the finance portfolio. I've worked on, I know my stuff, and I've worked on budgets, and, you know, this will be maybe my 17th budget that I've worked on, either not as just a policy analyst, but a person that's had to interpret it for law, or a person that's worked in a minister's office, or as an MP. I'm now the finance opposition spokesperson. So I have confidence in my competency to be able to feel confident that when I stand up, what I'm saying is right.
Definitely,
You're talking about all this history as a tax lawyer and how you've brought that into your portfolios. Obviously, you can do a good budget, maybe one that mathematically makes sense when others might not. You recently said that the new budget for National was a budget that cut women's pay. What did you kind of mean by that, and what should the alternative look like?
So if people can remember, there was a whole lot of furore around the week before budget. The ACT Party, as part of the government, announced that they were going to cancel pay equity claims for 33 sectors who had active claims in, and they were changing the law. Ultimately, when budget arrived, that price tag attached to cancelling those claims was close to $13 billion. Where would that $13 billion have gone to? That would have gone into low-paid, mainly women workers. So that's money that would have gone into their pocket that the government said, we're taking that and we're going to pay for, here's $200 million for a gas subsidy. Here's some more tax cuts for this particular area, you know. So if you're taking something away from one group and you're giving it to someone else, that's a pay cut. That's a cut, and it's coming out of women's pay. That's what I meant by they're cutting women's pay.
When we're talking about those tax cuts and maybe what the alternative would look like, this may be more a critical question. At the moment, Labor doesn't really have a wealth tax on the table in terms of their policy. What would you have to kind of say on that, and maybe how Labor has gone back and forth of that over the years?
So removing away from the tax element, so there is revenue. So tax is basically revenue coming into the government, which they then get to choose how they spend it on hospitals and health, on transport, and other areas like, you know, as simple as the Ministry of Pacific Peoples or Ethnic Communities. That's ultimately what taxes pay for. For Labor, we are going through that process of actually deciding what we will take to the next election. It will include, because we believe that the tax system is not as broad-based. So if you've ever followed tax, New Zealand's tax system is based on a principle of broad base, low rate. Keep the base of tax as much as you can to keep the rate really low. So GST is a very good example of that. Basically, there's only 2 exemptions for GST. Everything else, though, is subject to GST, and you can keep the rate lower. So for Labor, we are actively working through our tax policy, but we're also working through, what's our wealth creation policy? What is our housing policy? What is our health policy? And then we have to make all those numbers add up. We need to find savings in some place. We need to find places where we need to give a bit more money because we know that will make the economy grow, or to give people more money in their hands. And then figure that all out, balance it, and then take it to the election, which may be next year, could be this year. Who knows?
And speaking about the economy and all of this, what role do our rangatahi play in shaping the economy and future of Aotearoa?
Huge. I sat today in Youth Parliament and got to listen to the general debate speeches of about 20 Youth Parliament MPs from all different parts of, they were national selected youth MPs, they were Labour ones, Greens, Te Pāti Māori, etc. And when I heard the youth rangatahi talking about the issues that mattered to them, because they got 3 minutes and they got to basically speak on whatever they wanted, I just thought every speech that I was hearing, at least in the time I was there, absolutely resonated with me, because those are all the things that we were fighting for, for better homes for people, being able to get into your first home as a rangatahi, access to healthcare, better public transport, being able to be whoever you want to be in this country and have that respected, and the role of Māori and the role of migrants and Pacific people. So rangatahi are already highly engaged. A lot more engaged probably than my generation, because you have everything on your phones. We used to have encyclopedias,
crazy.
And dial-up only came when I was like in this, sort of in the 90s when I was a teenager. But ultimately, rangatahi, the future and the vision that Labour needs to take to the next election is for the future, is for your generation.
Definitely.
And I'm so heavily invested in that because I have 8 children. And my children keep me grounded every day. I walk through the door at home. They absolutely keep me grounded. They say, like, can you sign this? And can you pay for that, by the way? But ultimately, that is whom politicians need to think about. Because what's currently happening is a very short-term thinking that actually just makes it harder for the next generation coming forward.
And you were talking about Youth Parliament and how young people were able to speak on whatever they wanted, which is funny you say that because there were a lot of issues brought up about the young people's speeches being censored. Do you have any thoughts on anything about this?
I do believe that this Youth Parliament was a difficult one for a lot of our rangatahi because the way in which the feedback that was coming from the ministry running it, and I don't blame the officials, they get that direction from their ministers. So ministries do what their ministers ask them to do. So the fact is that when a rangatahi is being asked, okay, we want to vet your speech just to make sure it doesn't breach privilege. And then when the email comes back, these are the changes we require you to do. We don't want you to be critical of the government or don't talk about pay equity or that sort of, that sort of suggestion. That is censorship. And Youth Parliament is all about giving rangatahi a voice and having, this is your 3 minutes. Go for gold, or this is your select committee that you're coordinating or that you're on, or this is your question time. To then go on top of that and say, well, actually, we want to vet your speeches to make sure it's not critical of the current government. What a load of stuff.
It feels a little bit tokenistic, and especially a lot of the young MPs that I talk to, they get arguably the most political young people in the heart of politics and democracy in Aotearoa. They bring them to Parliament and they say, don't be political. What do they expect them to do? They don't want us to talk about anything that actually matters.
And any rangatahi that even applied to be a youth MP means you're highly engaged. Already means that you want to be in that space, or you have a lead, or you are a leader in your community or your school or whatever you do outside of school or at uni. So to be highly engaged enough to put in an application to go through the process of being selected, you're not just your average kid who spends time on TikTok, maybe not looking at the political messaging, but you're probably signed up in some ways to be engaged and you want to be there. So to then get there and be like, to have these almost like bunches of teachers saying, well, you can't say this and you can't say that. And as much as they said, oh no, it's been misinterpreted, it's like, it's quite clear when the email says changes required.
They weren't just suggestions.
They weren't just
were
suggestions.
Parts of our speeches that were fully cut out.
I think it's particularly outrageous for the pay equity ones and other policy that may have been passed under urgency. Like, that is a real critical issue. Do you have any other thoughts maybe on the amount of policy that was passed under urgency over the past year and in that quote unquote undemocratic way? Does that signal something about our government and maybe that people were willing to accept some of those things?
So urgency, the use of urgency effectively cuts out the select committee process, so the public submission process.
Public,
And usually bills, as they go through the House, they can take, the select committee process can be between 4 and 6 months.
Yeah.
Anything less than 4 months, it becomes a debatable point in Parliament. We're seeing with this government, not just the use of urgency being way more than Labor used in 6 years, and the way that they're basically slamming select committees, so the submission process is really tight.
Yeah.
It's a bit like the youth parliament, is they're trying to censor any criticism of them.
Yeah.
And so the pay equity, the cancellation of those 33 claims, that went through overnight.
Yeah.
And as much as Labor, we're very skilled in the House, we can do what's called filibustering, and we can question ministers quite at a length. You know, sometimes, you know, almost all day goes to midnight and then the rest of the morning.
Wow.
So Labor's very good at that. It still doesn't mean we have the numbers in the House. Eventually the debate closes and then there's a vote and the government just sweeps it through.
Yeah.
But that was, you know, over 100,000 workers who just had their claims
Insane.
taken overnight.
Overnight, just like that.
And some of those claims they had been working on for 3 years.
Wow.
You know, and some of them, I understand, like through some of the hospice workers, they were only weeks away from settling.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show is that the government's choice to basically do it overnight, to basically claw that money and to use it somewhere else, that was a very intentional and deliberate decision.
Yeah.
I think some people would argue that a lot of trust might have been lost in the government, especially over this last period. But also from both sides of the political system, I think a lot of people with our worldwide geopolitical issues are losing trust in some of those systems.
Definitely.
How would you say that we can restore that trust in society and restore faith in democratic process?
Education is such an important piece in this.
Yep.
So education, being able to have critical thinkers and to teach the skills of critical analysis within our schools is so important. So stay in school, kids. And if you don't, just keep learning.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whether no matter what
Don't
you
stop.
decide to do
Yeah.
when you leave school. But ultimately, that ability to have critical thinking, to see through misinformation, see through lies,
Yes.
and to actually, that doesn't sound right, I'm going to go do some research of my own. That's so important in a society. And that's why politics, in some ways, yes, we have this system of parliament, why it's okay to debate those different perspectives. What's not okay is not to be able to have that debate because you've shut it down.
Yeah.
So education is so important, particularly in this day and age where rangatahi have basically the world at their fingertips with a phone.
All the time, yeah.
All the time.
Everything.
And that's why when people ask me, well, what's your view on lowering the voting age to 16? And I'm like, well, why not?
Yeah.
And they say, well, you know, young people, you know, don't know anything yet, then they're not mature enough, they haven't been through experience. And my thing is like, well, I have 8 children at home.
Yeah.
My children are questioning me all the time on things that
They
they're
know.
seeing.
Yeah.
And they're seeing come up through their social media and they're like, what was this? What did this thing happen in Parliament today? Why did David Seymour say this? Always happens to be David Seymour for some reason. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
But young people are so much more engaged than the generations before because you have an encyclopedia at your fingertips.
Right, definitely.
And if you don't know the answer, just Google it.
Google it. Yeah, definitely.
So don't undersell. This is my message to others outside of, not yourselves, but outside of this place, is that don't undersell how smart our children are.
Definitely.
And there may be things that you'll try and stop them doing, but they'll find a way.
Yeah. And we just want to thank you for that lovely kōrero that you've had with us today. And we have one final question for you, and that is a message to our listeners who are very diverse and from all different backgrounds. What is one thing that you would like to say to them?
Kia kaha. Be proud of who you are. Be your genuine self and whatever you do, whether it's politics, whether it's in your local community, whether it's within your family, do it with purpose because life is very short. We don't have much time, so don't waste it.
Kia ora, Barbara. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. We have loved interviewing you, and we are now going to read a question from the guest book to you. Meg, would you like to do the honours?
Yes, I would.
Did I get to know who the guest was that asked me the question? Oh, no.
No, you don't.
Oh, no.
This is going to be great.
Secret.
Secret between me and Arthi. I didn't. Good question, though.
Yeah.
How can you include AI in what you are doing, so your work or whatever you do? And then additionally, on top of that, what do you think the future holds? Is AI going to become even bigger?
So I use AI every day.
Yeah.
So I am part of what happens when you're in opposition. You don't have much resource.
Yeah.
So AI is really excellent for basically cutting through huge volumes of information.
Yeah.
So I use it on a daily, and it still means I have to quality assure it,
Yeah.
which is what you should do when you have
Definitely,
AI. But it means for me that I can find information, find out how, for example, how does this country, that country, this country, how do they, what's their social welfare policy?
Yeah.
You know, it can work really quickly and compare it for you, and I can then review it.
Cool.
So I use AI every day,
Yeah.
and it makes things so much easier. But the issue going forward, however, it means that the work that AI does
Yeah.
might actually replace a person.
I know, that's scary
You know?
to think about that.
It's great for us because
Yeah.
we don't have much resource. But in the future, AI will take up some of the roles where, for example, if you work in a law firm, it might do a lot of the work that your graduate researchers might do.
Be doing,
So the thing is, there are opportunities from AI, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the question then is, particularly for decision makers, is what are the jobs of the future? How do we use AI and the opportunities that it brings to actually upskill and change the skill of your workforce?
Definitely.
So I think AI is going to be a great opportunity. You still need the human at the other side doing the quality assurance, which is what I do.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we have to embrace it and figure out a way to build the workforce of the future.
Beautiful answer. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for taking the time to come talk to us. And we hope you had a great time. And thank you to our listeners.
Thank you.
Ka kite.